This is the Q Dropped podcast. Stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Welcome, listeners, to Season 2 of the Q Dropped podcast, where we tell the stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Now, today's episode was a challenge to get out because some of the files were a little bit corrupted and we really struggled with it. But we powered through because this is an important story to tell. In it, we speak to two brothers whose QAnon father ended up running for office twice. I can't wait to let this story unfold for you, but first, a little housekeeping. I'm going to be giving a talk in Calgary in May at the Western Canadian Reason Conference, which is a conference that celebrates secular life and critical thinking. My talk is going to be called No, It's Not Just a Difference of Opinion, and I'll be talking about a lot of the things that I've learned here from my guests on the Q Dropped podcast. We're hoping to record it, so we'll see if that works out, and if it does, we'll get it out to our patrons as soon as we can. You can get tickets to the conference at the link in our show notes, and you can also find a link to our Patreon there as well. As a patron, of course, you won't just get access to that talk, but you'll also get ad-free versions of our episodes, and you'll be able to see some video clips of me speaking with Josh and Caleb, the two brothers I interview in this episode. So if you want to put faces to names, that's a great place to do it. In January, Caleb reached out to me through the Q Dropped webpage. He said, "My father is a Q believer, fully too far gone to reach. He ran for public office here in Colorado in 2020, and he believes he is fighting for good with God guiding him. He is delusional beyond saving, with racist, homophobic, bigoted ideology that he denies he believes in, even while fighting for hatred he believes he stands for love." And as soon as I read that message, I knew I had to speak with Caleb. We haven't yet spoken to someone whose Q has run for office in any country, and I wanted to know what that was like. What did it feel like to watch someone you knew was down the QAnon rabbit hole attempt to gain political power? In a perfect world, a son whose father is running for office would be proud, supportive, and even lend a helping hand on the campaign trail. But in this situation, it must have been absolutely terrifying. I had to talk to Caleb, and when I reached out, he asked if his brother could join us too. So, meet Caleb and Josh.
My name's Caleb. I'm 33 years old. We grew up in East Kansas in a normal, Christian, suburban family. My parents, loved each other when we were growing up, and they loved us too and raised us as good Christians.
I'm Josh Winiak. I'm 38.
When Caleb and Josh say they were raised Christian, they don't mean like your average, everyday cultural Christian. It should come as no surprise at this point in our podcast that this family was deeply religious.
Grew up very Christian. We went to church every day. We moved around to we never really told why we were moving around to a couple different churches. We, had to find that right church, the vibe kind of a thing with the parents. But we ended up non-denominational all growing up.
In all, Caleb and Josh were two of 5 kids their parents had.
I have an older sister. I'm the second oldest. Caleb's right behind me. And then we have the twins that are way younger than all of us. We were told from a very young age that it's the quiver full. They're shooting God's arrows out into the world. I'm sure you've heard that before. So we're very much raised in that we're meant to do God's bidding because that's the way we were raised.
Quiverful is, of course, one of these fundamentalist religious movements that we're getting used to hearing about on this podcast. It should come as no surprise that the Quiverful movement originated with conservative evangelical Christianity in the United States. The basic idea behind the quiverful movement is that children are seen as blessings from God and that families should have as many children as possible. Women, of course, are expected to toss any form of birth control they're using and submit to the will of God. The term quiverful is a reference to a verse from the Bible, which describes children as a heritage from the Lord and, like arrows in the hands of a warrior, to be used to defend the faith. Of course, the quiverful movement promotes traditional gender roles, with women being primarily responsible for raising children and managing the household, while men are seen as the spiritual leaders of the family. Women who subscribe to the quiverful philosophy often reject feminism and the idea of women's liberation and view their role as mothers and wives as central to their identity and purpose. They're discouraged from pursuing higher education while also being expected to homeschool their children. I don't have to tell you why this movement has critics, myself included. The central idea is the subjugation of women. And being a woman, I tend to take exception to that. I've left a link in the show notes if you want to know more about the quiverful movement, but be forewarned, if you're a progressive human to any degree, it's going to make you mad. While it doesn't sound like Josh and Caleb's family was fully into the quiverful movement, they did eventually adopt the homeschooling aspect of it.
And then we're going to public school until about my 7th grade. We started homeschooling because my parents are young earth creationists as well. Like, they are, as far as Christians go, they're like the more like, you're not really a Christian unless you believe this secret knowledge of young earth creationism kind of a thing. They've always kind of been that way. And so, like, after I went to public school from kindergarten to 6th grade. And then after that, we were homeschooled just because of that, like literally because they didn't want us to learn evolution. We listened to Kent Hovind for our science.
Kent Hovind and young earth creationism. This is going to be a treat for those of you who don't know who he is or what this is all about. Young earth creationists, or YECs, are people who believe that the earth was created in 6 literal days. No, you heard me right. 6 days. God was all, let there be light, and there was light, right? Yeah. YECs think this is literal. Of course, most Christians today accept the theory of evolution and the idea that life evolved on Earth over the course of millions of years. But YECs believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. Hence, young Earth. As if that's not weird enough, they also believe that God created dinosaurs on the 6th day of creation, which was just a few thousand years ago, and that humans and dinos coexisted on Earth until the biblical flood, which is their reason for the fossil record. Kent Hovind is sort of the face of the YEC movement and has been vocal about rejecting scientific consensus regarding evolution and the age of the Earth. He's the leader of the Creation Science Evangelism Ministry, through which he created videos and debates that have been seen all over the world. It should come as no surprise that this man has had a lot of legal troubles, including accusations of tax fraud and conspiracy, and has spent time in prison. He's also been convicted of domestic violence against his wife. So, all-around good guy, just spreading the word of God, Definitely the man you want teaching science to your kids.
It was very indoctrinating once we kind of grew up and looked back at it, and we thought it was kind of fine. Everything was always happy-go-lucky. We were a very happy family for the most part. But everything also was when we were going to church, everything was always about presentation.
Despite the fact that today the two brothers describe themselves as atheists, they both look back on their childhood with fondness, which they say is thanks to their mom. Throughout our conversation, they filled me in on a number of cherished memories with her.
We were all in the car with Mom. I think it was me, Josh, and our older sister. And we were all in the car, and me and Josh were bickering back and forth, and Aaron was probably trying to mediate and stuff. And then all of a sudden, my mom just gets super mad and says, "I don't want to always have to keep a Hawkeye on you guys." And that's one of the best things that we always go back to with her.
We instantly stopped bickering. Whatever, we all started busting out laughing because we didn't know what the heck she just said.
Mom did. It was all, anything we were squabbling about was over right then, and it was great. And we've brought that up a lot, and even in squabbles or whatever.
Josh recalls the first time his mom let him taste beer.
I was like 15, 16, and she had to get some beer to tenderize some meat, and we never get alcohol. There's not alcohol in the house because we're good Christians. And so we were at the grocery store and we were looking up the recipe, and she got upset that you couldn't use non-alcoholic beer to tenderize meat. She's like, "Oh, I have to buy real alcohol beer." And so we got the beer. It was a whole big ordeal. I was making a big deal about it, joking in the grocery store about it to everyone, just because we don't have beer in our house, kind of thing. And she was joking because she was always fun. She was just didn't make a big deal of it, or she wasn't as pious as as Dad is. And so then when we got home, I was bugging her about it, and I was like, "Well, what does it taste like? People love this. Obviously, and we don't do it because it's not, we're good Christians. Obviously, we're gonna think it's gross." And so she let me taste some, and then I had a big reaction, spit it out, how do people like this? Some cheap something, who even knows? But just trying to even connect with her, how do people like this? I will never drink beer, mother. Oh, just that kind of joking around with her, having good times, just stuff like that. Just having a good time with her, being present and goofing around with her. That never really happened with Dad because there's always something serious to talk about.
Sadly, the memories weren't as warm or happy when they involved their dad.
Our father, back in, I want to say 2002 or so, went on a extreme right-wing turn. Well, and he was always right-wing, but a further deep dive of corruption in America, and that he was gonna fix it somehow. And just really took a turn, quit his job and started a website called RestoreMyFreedom.com. And just was thinking that there was tyranny behind every corner.
Even earlier in the 90s, he had a crusade against the IRS. He took us to Washington, D.C. to march around the IRS building protesting our taxes, that are unlawful. So, he was always into some kooky stuff really early on, even earlier, early 90s.
And so me and Josh actually both had separate instances where we went to Washington, D.C. with Dad to I went to a bunch of senators' offices and gave them letters on taxation rights of Americans and stuff.
So while their father stopped working and dove headfirst into his crusade against the American government, Josh and Caleb's mom tried to keep things normal for her kids. While her Christian beliefs dictated that she was supposed to be at home with the kids, subservient to her husband while he led the family, she had no choice but to become the breadwinner.
And Mom was always just the one that was there caring for us, being mom and being a parent to us at all, being who you would think of as a good parent. She took care of us, and she was able to be a stay-at-home mom for most of, well, I won't say most of it, but until I was about 7 or 8. And then, because my dad had started this whole gig of restoring freedom to America and stuff, she actually had to go get a job and start working and supporting the family from, when I was young on. And that's been kind of a theme in our lives since. He's had jobs on and off here and there, but he's been pretty much on, for better or worse, a QAnon kick since before 2001.
At one point, their mother could no longer cope with her husband's antics.
She even did leave him for like a 6-month period. Like, she went and got herself an apartment because she was done with his shit. And somehow, because, blah, 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 Jesus and Christian good wives we don't get divorced. That's not what we do. Convinced her to come back. Like, it's been a roller coaster of sorts.
Yeah, and I lived with her actually during the time that she left. And we have 2 younger sisters as well that are twins, and they were both living with us as well, obviously. And she came to me because they were kind of too young to decide. I was, I believe, 16 at the time, and she came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm moving over to my parents' house, and they live like just down the street. Do you want to come with me and the twins, or do you want to stay with Dad?" And I mean, it was like an instant, "No, I'm coming with you. Like, I'm not going to stay with Dad." And that was, I think, the first time that I realized that I didn't really have a connection with my father. It was only my mom that I cared about. When the question was asked, it was like, no, duh, like, I'm going with you if you're giving me the option.
Since she went back to him, since that, like, she's never questioned anything about him, and she's kind of done nothing but gotten worse since then.
But after that, I do think I felt maybe jaded about that, and of course I started getting into like smoking weed and stuff in high school after all of that stuff. So naturally I kind of fell away from my parents from that too. But I do think that was kind of a clinch point of like, okay, I guess I can't trust you either.
Over the years, Caleb and Josh watched as their mother became increasingly radicalized by her husband.
I think it was just before the election in 2016. We had kind of noticed that they had like either a Trump sign or a Trump flag or something like that. And me and my little sisters had gone in and kind of tried to confront Mom on basically how Trump was kind of being, misogynistic and bigoted in a lot of ways, and very obviously. And, she reacted very negatively to that. And like, screamed at my little sisters, and we ended up mentioning, like, well, what about someone like Bernie Sanders? And she like nearly had a conniption and like was like, he's sucking off the teat of the government, and like started screaming at us about it. And so that was one of the first times I think we had kind of realized like, oh, Mom's, drinking the Kool-Aid too. Like she's down this rabbit hole with Dad. And, Dad's always been there, but she's starting to follow.
This was especially concerning to Caleb and Josh because their father was becoming increasingly hateful and bigoted.
He's been extremely homophobic our entire lives because his father was gay. And back in the day when it was not cool, you could die for that kind of stuff. And he had 5 kids, had to hide it until he was a lot older. And so like our dad has been, raised in church from, when he was a kid too. So like he, I think, had a lot of resentment to his own father, and he was extremely homophobic our entire lives, to the point where like Caleb had a friend that had an earring, and that friend got a lecture about how like only the gays, boys wear earrings and stuff like that. Like the homophobic stuff, like that's where we're saying like he was made for all of this hate that QAnon is. He was just good at kind of hiding it as like something else when we were growing up, but like he was made for this. I kind of remember like one specific situation where, because when Trump came out and all that shit with Mexicans are rapists and they're bringing all the drugs and all the bad people and stuff, I was like, and then Dad started supporting him, and I was like, he can't really be that racist. I've never heard him say anything overtly racist my entire life. I've known him my whole life. I've never heard him say like the N-word or even any kind of slurs or nothing like that. And he's always, we've had, we went to churches where, fairly mixed churches, was not like all white people, but like 80% white people. But so he'd been around people of color, but like right, so one of the holidays soon after Trump announced his run for presidency, I was talking to Dad about something, kind of just trying to feel it out more than anything. It was early on, and he just said literally outright that he's like, well, the Mexicans are coming over and taking our jobs, like just that blatantly. And I was just like right in my face, where I was just like, oh, okay. It's like, that's when it was just like obviously way too much for me. I was like, no, you're gone, man. Like, you're way gone.
The two brothers would become alarmed by the things their parents were saying and soon began to push back. They would repeatedly confront their parents, and it became more and more frustrating with each new conversation. If you've ever had a chat with a QAnoner about their beliefs, you know that they're constantly moving the goalposts. And of course, they're also gaslighting you and denying that they said things that you clearly remember they said. For the brothers, this became incredibly frustrating.
We literally had a conversation, and it got into, women's rights, obviously, and abortion. That's like a hot button issue. And my dad had made a comment about like, well, if women, accidentally get pregnant, then they can just go through the torture of having a baby and it's out. And, we were like floored by that comment, like, oh, it's just that easy. So later, we are talking, and it's a good 3-hour conversation, and not 30 minutes later in the conversation, Josh or I is just like, I mean, blah blah, all you think is that it's just and the baby comes out, and he's like, I never said that. And we were like, yes you did. And he's just like, I never did. That's some stupid shit that you said, and that's not anything that I would ever say. And I mean, it's literally just way over. We both are just floored. Like, what do you say to that? What do you say to someone who literally denies 1 minute to the next? It's mind-boggling. So.
Josh and Caleb decided to fight the gaslighting and began recording some of their conversations.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is common with a lot of QAnoners, but even before that, before QAnon was a thing, they just rattle off thing after thing, and you cannot even comprehend the things they're saying in the moment. So we quickly, took hold of we need to record this and go back and listen. And of course, our two younger sisters are politically minded as we are. And so they are more quiet with mom and dad about, being out there and stuff, but they agree with us. So they like listening to the, recordings and stuff like that.
We were just trying to kind of push and see what he actually believes. That we were taking notes, trying to pin him down on something, any actual thing. And you can never pin him down on something. He got literally mad because I was taking notes. He's like, well, you can't just take notes and throw what I said back in my face.
The relationship between the siblings and their parents continued to deteriorate.
We kind of had a standoffish relationship with them pretty much when Trump came. It was more standoffish, obviously, after Trump was elected and stuff. And we obviously had differing political viewpoints and such. But it was always still cordial. And then, of course, just like all the other stories, the pandemic hit, and it more, instead of they went off the deep end, because I feel like they were already off the deep end, it was more like they went further off a deep end, and it was an excuse for us to be like, oh, the pandemic, we can't associate anymore, so we just kind of got to have that break from them.
During their time away from their parents, the brothers' lives went back to normal, and all was calm.
And then, of course, once everything started opening back up, in air quotes, it was like, oh, come see us. And and we just kind of started having these tiffs back and forth. And then right after the vaccine, it started coming out about a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's just in waves, more and more conspiracies. So I had kind of reached a breaking point because I was still trying to be in contact with them because I have a kid. and their grandkid, so I was trying to be the good son and at least, let them have communication with my kid. And so I had confronted them alone one time, and I had both mom and dad there. So when I had done that, I had kind of come out, and I still wasn't being super nice and loving, but kind of calling them out, for their bullshit ideals kind of thing, like this and this and this. And then it still didn't end well. It ended literally with me telling them that I thought they were insane people.
But Caleb said he still wanted to talk about these things because he was concerned about where they might be going with all of this.
We had planned time to talk after that, and we did with my dad. And I had asked if my older brother, can Josh come along too? And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. And so we show up, and not really thinking to specify that we wanted mom to be there too. And we didn't think anything of it at the time. We were like, that's fine, and so we just kind of went at it. And that was probably the time where, I was just mad. Like I was every, like what every, like the lowest left winger on the internet would say, just like, that's stupid, and just like the quips back about stuff,
He had good quips, but they're very unproductive. Fun for us, but like, because he says the most infuriating things, like just it's amazing because he was so never really let that out when you're like a child. So like, but when you get into his true like inner brain, what he really thinks about other human beings, he's a monster. Like, he doesn't care about human lives. He just has a strict way of the way things are supposed to be, and this is the way God wants it. So, and that just allows him to say monstrous things. So Caleb is like, how can you say this? and I'm over here trying to calm everybody down. Like, can we just answer one question? Like,
he's trying to use street epistemology, and I'm just over here like pushing buttons, like it just doesn't work. That's for sure.
Well, the funny thing is, like, when we were trying to do that, when we first started meeting and talking about stuff, I mean, it got heated, but we agreed to try to like keep the dialogue open. We even opened up a group text with me and Caleb and him. And we're like, if you want to send us some stuff that we want to know what is convincing you of these things. Like, you believe the craziest things that we cannot believe. Send us your information. Like, we're willing to go over it. And I literally watched a 3-hour literal Nazi propaganda video about the Rothschilds and all kinds of stuff. And I tried to go through like point by point things. I was like, this is Nazi propaganda. Like, I don't know how else to tell you. And I was trying to kind of be nice at it at first. And he definitely was not watching whatever we send him. He had no answers or replies for any of that kind of stuff. So then like, we kind of started giving up on watching his 3-hour Nazi propaganda. And it started to just kind of break down after, because like the third time that we met with him was kind of the last time. And the group chat kind of broke down into us just like throwing like snarky, like, well, it's looking bad for Trump over here, like the Jan 6 committee and stuff like that. Like, just like stuff that he has no answer for. And he never replied. Like, after a while, he stopped replying.
The brothers told me that the dishonesty didn't end with their political positions. Josh and Caleb's parents struggled to make ends meet without their father working and came up with creative ways to find money.
They're also thieves. They've stolen money from literally all of us children. No big deal. My dad quit his job to do his whole Restore My Freedom thing back in the day when I was like 16. I started plumbing when I was 18. Got my own plumbing company now. Those plum bros. But I was literally giving all of my paychecks to my parents because like we needed to support the household because dad was fighting for freedom. And so like my older sister, she had to give all of her money. I had to give all of my money. And like they've stolen money from the twins that was supposed to be like tuition money for their school. And they're like, it's supposed to be like for a laptop for her. They're like, well, we got you covered. We're just going to take this, because it was like all in their name because they were co-signers and stuff like that. I know he spent money, and that's the one thing that they are silent as hell about, is they will not tell me how much money they've donated to Donald Trump. I've asked them, like, how much money did you donate to Donald Trump? How much money have you spent on Donald Trump merch? How much money have you given to Alex Jones? And how much money did you give to the frontline doctors? Like, I've asked them all these questions, and it's always met with silence. So, like, I know they're giving money to these people, and it's not my dad's money. It's his Social Security money and my mom's hard-earned money. And he's just giving it away to these people that, you know, this is the cause that we, you know, your money is my money. Obviously, he did that with us. Even like he has no qualms about taking everyone else's money and spending it on whatever the hell he wants to.
As the money problems pressed on, the ideas their parents would spew became increasingly wild.
He did believe in the whole JFK is coming back and he's going to reinstate Donald Trump. Like, he believed that wholeheartedly, for sure. And that was kind of one of the craziest ones, really. Like, huh? Like,
that was one time when I was still living with them, and me and my wife would normally do like Saturday morning breakfast where we would get up and make ourselves breakfast kind of thing. And yeah, he had come down when we were making breakfast, and we were just like, yeah, you know, there'll be enough for you kind of thing. And he's like, oh, thanks, guys. Did you know that John F. Kennedy Jr. is probably going to be the next vice president? And it's just like, okay, like literally like open with that after, you know, breakfast is ready.
Well, and then also just the straight up, like, they're eating babies. Adrenochrome is super real. Obviously, it's real. You're crazy for thinking it's not. Like, what do you do with that kind of stuff? Like, Hillary Clinton isn't eating babies, Dad. Like, I don't know what else to tell you.
Donald Trump is actually still the president because the America was made a corporation back in like whatever.
Before the Civil War.
Yeah, so Donald Trump is actually now the 19th president of the United States, because right after the 18th president is when it was actually a corporation, and all the presidents after that were actually just CEOs and figureheads, and there was a real government running everything. And Donald Trump is running the real government underground with, like, you know, in Mar-a-Lago, I guess.
But screw Joe Biden for those gas prices. Like, now that we're getting into it, like, another crazy one was when the Ukraine, Russia attacked Ukraine. He was all the way on Putin's side. Like, Putin is denazifying Ukraine, and Trump and Putin and Modi in India, and who else was it? Xi Jinping. All of them are the real leaders trying to fight against the globalists. Like, he told me about the frontline doctors when the whole ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. He was trying to get that in the frontline doctors who are the real patriots and stuff. And like recently, when they're found, like the leader of them was found out to have been like embezzling millions of dollars. I sent that to him as one of the snarky text messages. I was like, "Did you follow the money?" Because that's what you always tell us to do, is in the frontline doctors, those ones that are patriots, did you follow the money? Like, her and her boyfriend ran away with it, so how much money did you give them? No answer.
But even after having their parents steal from them and hearing all of their unhinged theories, the worst part of it for both of the brothers was clearly the loss of their cherished relationship with their mom.
Definitely after Trump having to wrestle with my mom just being okay with my dad being this way, started to just notice a lot more that, like, yeah, she's also just like down the rabbit hole and too far gone. I think a lot of it was a little bit confusing because, like we said, we had a lot of genuine times with my mom when we were younger. And then, but like really the time that she started to like kind of get into all this stuff and he was able to manipulate her even more was when we were gone. So like we didn't get to see him stealing our mom from us, and it made it even more confusing kind of how like we didn't even really get to notice our relationship breaking down with our mom, kind of a thing.
I think the biggest thing that I could say when I realized that she is definitely like way too far gone and like mom is not here anymore kind of realizations was the time that I spoke about where right after the vaccine during the pandemic and stuff, I showed up at their house and kind of had the first confrontational talk with them where I was just questioning everything that they had. And that was one of the conversations where she was there and she was, just had those conspiracies in lockstep with dad, and she'd be right along with them, they're trying to give me the jab and, blah, blah, that's coercion.
She's starting to say things like, you'll see when all the arrests start happening and stuff like that. Like, okay, mom, like, the earliest sign for me, though, was when time Caleb mentioned earlier when one of our little sisters was trying to talk to her just about Bernie Sanders. And she literally had a conniption about, like, he's evil, I can't stand Bernie Sanders. Like, it's just, he's like the most... there's nothing scary about Bernie Sanders. Like, how can you freak out this much about an old man who shakes his fingers like, we need more money for the poor people?
Eventually, it all just became too much for Josh.
I kind of excommunicated myself about like 3.5 years ago, just because I was like, I cannot just come and make face at holidays and act like everything's honky-dory for everyone and do all this. And I just can't anymore. And I was more easily able to do it because I didn't have a kid or anything. So, like, that's why they kind of just wrote me off way earlier than him, too. Because, like, I was done with it. I couldn't handle making face and just faking it. For me, it's, like, just the hypocrisy that you can show him straight to his face and he will like, and just the way that it's just a difference of opinion, although, and I'm all for small government, but I want to control women's bodies and gay people can't get married and all these things. Like, you want to control the lives of everybody and like people can't live their lives and be free like you claim to, that's the hypocrisy. You claim freedom and you are against everything about freedom, and you can show them like that straight to their face and it's impossible to make them see it. And that's just the most infuriating thing ever. And it's exhausting. Like, everyone, like, it always is, like, it's exhausting to even just try to understand how they're putting two opposing thoughts in their brain at the same time. Like, I can't do it. Like, I don't know how they do it. One of the talks we had, and it got, heated and all that stuff, and we could never pin him down on anything. And he was always like, well, you guys are cutting me off. And we're like, okay, we're going to ask you this one question, and we're going to give you 5 minutes to answer the question without us cutting you off at all. And we like set a timer and everything. We're like, okay, so if the vaccine is bad, why is Donald Trump telling you to get the vaccine now? And he gave this whole long spiel about, like, well, soccer players are having heart attacks, and, well, if he didn't say it, then the media would be mean to him and say mean things about him, and like all kinds of stuff, like just stream of consciousness, nothing. And so we gave him the whole 5 minutes, and then I was like, okay, answer me this. Just one big thing. It was like, when has Donald Trump given a shit about the media saying mean things about him? What is his favorite thing to say, Dad? What is it? Is it fake news? Because I'm pretty sure it's fake news. Like, you can't tell me that he's scared of the media as an answer to why he's lying and telling people to get the vaccine when he really knows that it's actually bad, but he wants, the true patriots to know not to get the vaccine, but he's just out here making face with the media. And then blah, blah, blah. Soccer players are having heart attacks. Like, there's no, like, you can't let him talk. He never makes sense. Like, so, like, he can never make a full point, even if you try to let him. We literally just cannot agree on what reality is. Like, I mean, he literally told me that I'm going to die because I got the vaccine. Our uncle died of COVID. And yeah, like, we had an uncle that died of COVID. Even my aunt, she kind of like she's the same as them, but not nearly as bad as far as like, she doesn't believe in vaccines. And it's funny because like, we're like, okay, lay it out first. Like, how did Uncle Jody die? And he's like, okay. And the funniest part about this whole thing is that he lays out a really good explanation about comorbidities. He's like, okay, his granddaughter got COVID and from school, and she, had it, was kind of, didn't have that much trouble with it. She was fine. Your aunt got it, and she had a little bit of trouble with it because, she's a smoker, but she was just fine. But then Jody got it, and he had all these, he had a bunch of damage on his lungs. And so that's, along with the COVID, that's what made him die. It's like, that's what comorbidities are. That's what, like, you die of. That's what it is when you die of a comorbidity added with COVID. Like, you are explaining it very well right now. And then you're like, but nuh-uh. Like, how are you not seeing it? Like, we're trying to get people like Uncle Jody from getting COVID at all so he doesn't die from his comorbidities. Can you see it, please? Just see it, please.
Soon, Caleb was nearing his wit's end, too.
The belittling nature of every syllable that comes out of his mouth, whether it's like, I know history. I've been studying history since before you were born, and I've been on this journey. And just even in normal conversation, everything is like that. Even like telling jokes and stuff too. His jokes are old jokes that he's told you a billion times, and he just wants you to laugh, and it's just that era of entitlement, I guess, that comes with everything that he says. And it's the entitlement of like, I'm obviously right and walking in, God's path, for lack of a better term. And that's just how he believes. So if you don't believe like him, which if, obviously he just naturally knows that we don't, everything is like laced into that, kind of rhetoric of just like, I'm the smart one, you're the child. One of the things that he does repeat to us over and over, and I mean, I remember hearing it back when I was a kid, and I remember the first time hearing it was like, wow. But one of the things he says is, I've studied so much, I know, or I've forgot more than most men know. And it's like, what an arrogant statement, And again, when I was a kid, I was like, wow, like, that's ridiculously amazing. Or, like, those other guys are stupid kind of thing. But, realizing as an adult, you're like, Jesus Christ, who talks to you? Like, nobody talks like that. So, yeah, and Josh is kind of, I think for lack of a better word, like excommunicated from them a while ago, quite a few years ago. And then I never really did, just one, because I had a kid and I was living with them when Trump was elected and stuff, so it's just, I never really felt like I needed to really cut him off,
After the two brothers tried to distance themselves from their parents, they found out that their father was running for office.
For the 2020 cycle, our dad ran for Secretary of State of Colorado to try to sway the election for next time, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, he wanted to control the Electoral College. And he found people, he found a community. And we were talking about this earlier about like, why didn't he was made for this, like being a slimy politician kind of a person. why didn't he do this earlier? It's because he was a nobody and nobody cared about him or gave him money. But now that he had this like network of QAnon people, he could find like moneyed people to like, well, I'm super important and, you know, I care about all the right things kind of a thing. And he somehow just found the backing through these QAnon networks. And I think that's why he was like, yeah, I definitely should run for office because I am the right guy. I've been training my whole life to be this kind of a thing. And he felt very entitled to it, I believe. But yeah, we were wondering why he hasn't done this earlier, but I think it's literally just he didn't have the money and didn't have anybody backing him. But now when you have a network of where we go one, we go all, you know.
Yeah, and he's just found people, you know, again, right-wingers here in Colorado Springs that were right on the Q train with him. And we're like, yeah, you're willing to do that? Like, you don't have a job? Cool. Why don't you go out and run for office? And he was like, you know what? I should do that.
Their father's platform was exactly as you might expect.
He was very against vaccines, even though I don't think whatever he was running for had anything to do with that. Like, he would talk about stuff like that and just how, you know, they're taking away our freedoms. And he was running for a
Secretary of State.
That's the one that controls. They like do the electoral college like thing. That's during the presidential election. They were the ones that, like, if there were fake electors, they would have been giving the fake electors of the electoral college to the Congress, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in place to be able to next time give them, it's like, oh, this went for the guy I didn't like, so I'm just going to change it. That's what he was literally running for, is to do that.
Yeah, one of the conversations we were having with Mom was like, yeah, he's, you know, hey, why are you running? You know, and I was like, it's just so you can change elections. And my mom was like, well, if they did it wrong, then yeah, like that's what we need to do.
Election fraud was his big platform, you know, obvious stop the steal kind of stuff.
It was unsettling for the brothers, to say the least.
That was the first time I had opened up like that. I want to talk to you guys about politics and stuff, you know, and open up that confrontational side of things, if you will. And the first thing I opened with was like, you know, I see you're running. Obviously, you told me about that. So you're not allowed to, like, you know, use us in family pictures or use, you know, my son in any sort of pictures to like boost your campaign or anything. Like, you know, you don't have your family in this campaign kind of thing. And he was like, oh, it's well understood. We know, you know, but that was one of our first reactions to that knowledge was like, you're not going to be using your good old family, man. So that's right out.
I was a little terrified. Like, there's a stupid chance he might. The universe is crazy right now. He could win, and I am going to have to, I don't know, poison him or something. Who even knows? Like, I cannot have him win. There's no way. His ego is like the size of a mountain right now. He cannot win office for anything. This cannot happen. Like, that was the fear that I had, like, right off the bat. But then, like, the more it went on, we kind of got more information, kind of realized he didn't really have a chance for that one. So it started to ease off a little bit as far as the fear of him winning or something like that. So
luckily, their father didn't win the election for Secretary of State.
Yeah, he got quickly beat out by another Republican, so he switched to something else, you know, and he really thought he was going to start his political career now, though, because he had failed his way all the way up everywhere else in corporate America, so he was going to try his hand at politics now, which, you know, a 60-some-year-old white guy, that's the perfect alley for him, right?
Their father would run for county commissioner next.
But even till the end, like until he quit and went to the next race, which was, you know, lower down county commissioner, I wasn't too worried about that one nearly as much. But the one where he was like, yeah, I'm going to do fake electors. And, well, he didn't never said that out loud, but that was definitely the plan. Like, that was the plan. We, you know, pay attention to politics a little bit, and there's like all kinds of people all over the country that were QAnoners trying to become Secretary of State to do exactly that. And that's exactly what he was there for.
It was really with the downing of Roe v. Wade that I think I kind of got way more like vocal on the chat line and was just like, dude, like this is uncool. You are literally taking rights away from people now, and he just was totally non-responsive on anything. And anytime we tried to talk about anything, it was, shutting it down. Of course, if it was anywhere on like a family gathering and not a scheduled talk that we were going to be confronting him on, so it was just getting nowhere. He lost all of his elections that he had and tried to fight him in court here.
Like Trump, their father was convinced his election was stolen. How did he take it when he lost?
We never really, that was kind of after somewhat, because I would say our talks that we had with him were earlier on, when he had just announced. And by the time, near the end, when he had lost, all communication had kind of broken down somewhat. So, we didn't really get his reaction too much. But judging by the court cases that he, filed for, that the election was stolen from him, obviously, I'm guessing he didn't take it very well.
Their parents said that if the court cases didn't turn out the way they wanted them to, they would pack up and move to Iowa. And your mom was standing by him through all of this.
She had jobs. She was always working since, we were, younger. I was 15, 16?
Probably 11 years old. Yeah.
So she's been working ever since.
Do you think that there's any part of her that is resentful of him?
Well, definitely before they moved up to Iowa, they did kind of let us know right before, but it was a bit sudden. But she was talking about it we're finally going to all get to retire up in Iowa, because my dad's been, retired and living off his Social Security, even though he hates socialism. But I could hear it in her voice that she's we're all going to finally get to have some time off in Iowa when we move there. So there's definitely some resentment of her having to work and him just sitting around doing his political thing his whole damn life.
Yeah, and there's definitely just been underlying resentment from her too. She's definitely one of those people, Dad's not a fun person to be around, even in holidays and stuff. He's just annoying and gets, annoyed at things. And he's just one of those people that even to her just talks to her well, just if you did it my way kind of thing. And she's always the one to just under her breath be well, no, and just say things back to him under her breath. And she's over him too, but she's too good of a Christian wife to admit that for sure.
It should come as no surprise that their father's commitment to quote-unquote freedom has kept him isolated.
He doesn't have any genuine friends that are other than his people that he went to church with, that we all definitely believe the same Jesus, or now his QAnon friends. He doesn't have any friends that are just friends.
To be clear, he had plenty of opportunities for all those friends, and to be able to make those connections with plenty of other guys, in the same position as him. He just doesn't have that human connection, and kind of growing up realizing that was a shock. I've described too that if, everyone goes through this time where you grow up and become a teenager and you're oh, my parents are stupid. And then you kind of grow up past that and go to college and realize, oh, I was stupid and my parents were just trying to save me from little things or whatever. But we never really got that. We got oh, my parents are stupid as kids, and then grown up to realize, oh, they are stupid. They're the stupid ones. Dad doesn't have an identity past I'm a Christian, now QAnoner, who believes in the truth. But yeah, and that was something that I struggled with, growing up. I kind of, always thought that my life was just going to be laid out in front of me because I was a good Christian, and that's what my identity was, because that's all my dad had as an identity. And so really having to go through that in my early 20s, was difficult, trying to crawl my way out of essentially a Q hole from childhood. It was ridiculous.
Their father's relationship with his eldest daughter has suffered as well.
That's the funniest thing is like, we've heard kind of that they're having a little bit of trouble with like trying to cope with how crazy my parents have come, because they're very right-wing conservative themselves, very, still they homeschooled all their kids the same way, as far as like she took the whole young earth creationism hook, line, and sinker and took that and taught it to her kids. Like, she doesn't want them learning evolution kind of thing. So they're all homeschooled just like we were. So that she's like following in their footsteps, trying to be like, a good daughter and do like what a good Christian woman would do kind of a thing, but like they just got a little extreme for her, I think. And I've only heard tricklings of them kind of like having to like, okay, can you not talk about these crazy conspiracy theories, especially around our children? Like, that's kind of happened.
I asked both Caleb and Josh what they thought drew their father to the QAnon narrative.
My dad was radicalized by a book called None Dare Call It Treason. And I remember because he was playing with me when I was about 6 or 7 in the bedroom, and we were at a family Christmas, and my aunt came in and said, "Hey, I just read this book that I really think you'd be interested in," and gave it to him. And thinking back on it, that was what started it all.
As far as like what got him into it was just like his whole, like we said, like he's just kind of been this way, and he was primed for it. Alex Jones and Rush Limbaugh primed him for conspiracy theories. And well, I mean, his religion in general did at first, and then the whole young earth creationism stuff with Kent Hovind not wanting to learn science, and then it's just an easy progression right into all these conspiracy theories. And like we said, this just queued it right up for him. I mean, right. That's a little pun there, I guess. He has been just like, I don't know, chasing something his entire life that I don't even really know. But it's definitely like he feels like he's doing the right thing for humanity because he's pushing God's agenda. And that just the sense of accomplishment for, being a good Christian, if anything. Like, and it's kind of sad because like you're willing to be a monster just to feel like you're a good person.
I think my dad gets a real sense of purpose and importance out of it. Just the fact that he knows things that other people refuse to see, or knowing the truth is just basically what he gets. He knows he's in the right because God is on his side. And this is people telling him that he's not wrong.
Despite always remembering their father being this way, Josh and Caleb still can't help but be surprised their father fell down this rabbit hole.
The funny part is, like, he's always been, he was a computer programmer when we were growing up. He worked for, like, IBM. We always thought of him as a really smart person because he was, like, computer savvy when we were all growing up. We had the internet pretty much as soon as you could have a personal computer in your home. Like, we had all that right at our fingertips.
Today, Caleb and Josh don't have a lot of contact with their parents.
So they'd recently moved out of Colorado, and it's just been nice, just to not have them in the same state, to try to, distance yourself a little bit. It's easier to distance yourself that way.
I am still in contact with my parents. The relationship, just for better or worse, is more standoffish than anything. I don't really contact them unless I absolutely need to, and they know we differ in political beliefs, so they just don't really contact me unless they're in town or, specifically coming to try to see me or whatever. And when we are together, it's just very sunshine and rainbows, talking about the weather and almost nothing else, because it just leads down difficult paths. So them moving to Iowa, I think, kind of helps, but it doesn't help with the standoffish relationship, I guess. It's still just there and has been made easier by them moving.
Caleb struggles with knowing when to draw the line.
I mean, I don't know what the future looks like and stuff, so I did never want to run afoul of having my kid not know who they are and then all of a sudden meet them and be like, my dad's lied to me about, so I was just trying to keep the communication open, especially with my son, and they still love him as a person and stuff, so just trying to keep that open was hard. And something, I've been going to therapy for a while, and something I've actually talked to my therapist about was like, when do you think in Nazi Germany it was okay to tell your family, like, hey, you're, believing Hitler and stuff? Like, that's not cool. I don't think we can do Christmas anymore. Like, when was the okay time to do that in, the 30s in Germany? I don't know. And I feel like we're going towards fascism fast, and I don't know when the correct time would be to cut off someone who completely, wholeheartedly agrees with everything that's going on. So it's just a question that I've struggled with, and I'm sorry I do not have an answer for that.
There are definitely things that Josh does not miss.
It's like playing a game of Operation. Anytime like if something goes like you hit the wrong thing, like you're like, oh crap, like, and just having to try to like be happy while also avoiding talking points is just like, when we just want to be normal people and like talk about the world and stuff that's happening, but you can't talk about just normal things with any of them, because like anything about anything, because I mean, and they like to talk about like, you're making things political. It's like, everything is political. Like, everything in society, the way we decide to do anything is political. So it's almost impossible to like not run into something political to talk about.
But both brothers deeply miss the relationship they had with their mother.
I think just the ease of relationship and conversation and time spent together. Now, when I spend time with my mom, it still just feels guarded, and everything's, said with a purpose, or everyone's walking on eggshells. I know I walk on eggshells when I'm around them, not to trigger any conversation or anything. And I feel like they do around me. Well, they've told me as much. And I just feel, it's just a hard relationship. And I miss just her being mom, and like a normal kid feels with their mom. I just don't feel that anymore. I think one of the things that would stand out to me would be just the implication that everything I believe and hear or say is lies, and I'm believing specifically lies from the devil. And just that kind of implication, has deep meaning, and it's kind of fucked up, and I just don't like that. And I think that's probably what hurts the most about all this, is it's almost straight out of the satanic panic from the 70s and 80s, and it hurts that that's how she views me and everything I think.
They try to include me in the group texts for like, hey, we're all getting together, even though they kind of know it's futile. And I just don't really reply anymore. I've given up on trying to like really have much communication. I would love to have a bit more of a relationship with my mom, but I also know it would just be really frustrating. Like, it would be frustrating every time to try to talk to her, because she's going to bring something up my dad, like, put in her head, or that she, researched herself, because she's all into this stuff now. So like, that's really just where I'm more sad that I can't even really try. Like, I kind of wanted to try. There's even a couple of times right before they left that I like hung out with her by herself, like just her. Tried to even like just kind of keep it light and like not talk about any political stuff, which we both succeeded at doing, but it felt, kind of blah compared to like, like I said, times we used to have fun and actually like be genuine with each other. So like after that, like especially spending time with her like that, like kind of right before they left, it just made me realize that it's kind of futile. Like there's really not a whole lot there to like glom onto as far as the relationship anymore. I mean, I would love to have her back, but she's just gone.
QAnon is a source of anxiety for Josh.
The thing that concerns me about QAnon as a whole is that it is getting people that are seemingly nice, normal people, thinking people, somehow it's getting them as well. Like, I can't handle how, like, his ridiculousness is influencing seemingly smart people. And I feel like we're just at this kind of, like, precipice of inhumanity of, like, are we going to kind of start all thinking about this collectively and, like, do something about it? But, like, yeah, like, just that, where it's like it's starting to get people that you wouldn't think, just like your normal like kind of guru-y type people, where they're getting like radicalized into some evil shit, and it's freaking me out. Like it's spread to all parts of the world, and that is insane to me. Like I just don't get why people are connecting with it so much, and I feel like part of it is some of that where like people haven't felt, connection or all that much love, and then when you find this group that is like, come with us, where we go one we go all, we're all special, like you just find a little bit of that connection that like you're kind of missing before. And that's the scary part, really, is that it's just so simple, if anything.
Caleb also worries about what implications QAnon might have on our collective future.
Just the effect on our society and how it seems to be slipping towards fascism, and this seems to be the oil getting us there and getting any portion of the population over the goal on supporting fascism. It's very scary.
The relationship Josh and Caleb had with their mother is a significant loss in their lives, and one that they have struggled to come to terms with.
I would say, honestly, I'm just not coping very well. The things I do is try to distract myself, focus more on the here and now with my kid. I do try to stay up politically on news so that I can feel informed on, reality of what's going on in our politics today, but I do just try to distract myself too. I have delved into the Star Wars universe just to try to get my mind off of the here and now and reality of what's going on.
But the brothers have solid support systems to lean on. My
support structure does look pretty good. I have, of course, my brother in town here. I do have my two little sisters. They are some of my best friends, and we get together often and do game nights and just hang out. I do have a loving spouse who is very supportive in all this, with my dad and mom as well.
I mean, I have a really good support network of like friends that I found when I moved here in Colorado. I got married. She's going to kill me. 4 years ago, 5 years. Actually, no, it was right in the middle of COVID, because we got married in COVID, like in the middle for like insurance reasons, so I could be under insurance and everything. Yeah, I mean, I have me and my wife, and we have two roommates that we live with, and bunch of animals. And obviously me and Caleb have a relationship. He lives like right down the road from me. And we, try to hang out as much as we can. And our little sisters now, like, that they don't live with my parents anymore, I'm trying to hang out with them a lot more.
I asked Caleb and Josh if they had any advice for those of us with QAnoners in our family.
Think about yourself in these situations and your own mental well-being first. When you're dealing with QAnoners, they tend to suck energy and joy and hope out of you. So just be mindful of your interactions with them and of the places that they do take you mentally and physically, and just be mindful of that at all times when you do have to interact with them.
If you really are trying to salvage a relationship with somebody, like, the best thing to do really is just come at it a little bit softly and try to challenge, their positions, but just not too harshly. Like we said, we approached it very wrong as far as not being harsh, and that's not the way to do it. But yeah, definitely try if that's what you want to do. If you're trying to salvage the relationship, I don't think anyone is really too far gone. I guess like that too, there's that other spectrum where, like, if you need to, like, protect yourself, like, you owe them nothing, even though you're their, child, you don't owe them a goddamn thing. Like, if you need to pull away from that just for your own mental health, definitely pull away in any way you need to, nicely or meanly, however you need to do it. Just get away from that if you need to.
Our sincerest thanks to Josh and Caleb for sitting down with us for this interview. They were two incredibly friendly, funny, and warm people who do not deserve a loss like this. We wish the best for both of them and their families. You can watch parts of our chat in video format on our Patreon so you can see the brothers' faces interacting with yours truly. The link is in the show notes. And next week, we talk to a woman whose MAGA father has cut her out of the will. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube to be notified when that goes live. Thank you so much for listening to the Q Drop podcast.